Today I'm delighted to be joined by Caroline Macefield, Global Chief Audit Executive for the Aegon Group, one of the world's leading providers of life insurance, pensions and asset management. Good afternoon, Caroline. How are you?
I'm good, Mark. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Um, Maybe can you start by telling me, I guess, what first attracted you to internal audit, please, and share a bit about what life involves as a global head in a multinational financial services organisation, please.
Sure. Well, I started out in external audit and I trained as a chartered accountant. And after many years of busy seasons and late nights, I started to dabble more in the controls side of things, doing these external assurance engagements on an organisation's customer-facing controls. And I really liked the structure and the nature of that type of work. I really felt it started to get into the heart of what a business was about. And so slowly I got more into, internal audit. And also a big game changer for me was the publication of the CIIA code for financial service institutions in 2013. Because I remember when I was a newly qualified accountant, internal audit always seemed like a bit of a box ticking exercise to me. But the code really opened that up. So post-financial crisis, the internal audit profession realised it needed to be much more than just manual controls in a finance function. And culture started to be put on the table, and corporate events and all these other things. And the position of audit in the organisation was really elevated. So as I grew more in my career and I started to get to that level where I was looking at leadership roles, I felt that I really needed to do something where you had a full holistic view, because I'm pretty restless, I'm bored easily, I like to know a little bit about everything. And you can do that in internal audit. You know, I think about it as the view from the balcony, so you can see the whole organisation.
Yeah.
And I guess nowhere more is that so than when you're in the global function of an organisation with operations in multiple countries in the world. So before this role, I was the head of internal audit in Aegon UK. So I had the experience of the kind of busy delivery agenda of running the audit function of a subsidiary, and that was during a period of immense change for Aegon UK. When I moved into the global role, I could see some of the businesses going through similar challenges. But my typical day, I mean, I almost every day span multiple geographies. I think much as this remote way of working doesn't suit some people, it certainly takes away the amount of time I spend in airports. So last year, my job was travel intensive. This year it's intensive, but it's content intensive, because you're able to connect to so many more people more easily. But my job is broadly to lead the audit function and really encourage, inspire and help them be the best that they can be in delivering value and insight to the organisation. Aegon is multiple different businesses and various parts of the world. So we have to strike this balance between having teams that are close to business and understand the local agenda, but operating within a global framework. So there are clear minimum standards, and that for me, it's very important you can compare the results of audit fairly from one place to another, even though the underlying audit subject matter might be very different.
Yeah. I mean, what have been the main challenges, I guess, faced by you and your team during 2020, and how have you adapted to try and address some of these?
Yeah, so 2020 has been an interesting year. I cast my mind back to this time last year, and it honestly felt like I was living on a different planet. We were developing 2020 plans, and we were all together in The Hague around about a year ago. It looks different. In fact, pretty much as we tabled the audit committee plan, it's just a few weeks into running, it effectively got upended. And we ended up doing what looked close to replanning exercise in Q1. And some of the teams were deployed into doing very rapid assessments into business critical processes that were materially changed by the fact we were working from home. And some of the teams were obviously it was a bit of an adjustment, really, moving into this situation. But I think we dealt with it very well, and the technology has held up. And we now, I think we've gone through that initial phase of where you're almost figuring out how you can work virtually, to now, I would say, much more of an operating rhythm around about, and just people are used to it, get the audits done. It's actually easier to access people, less sort of tied up in meetings. The biggest change I've noticed actually is people always on time, so that's good.
Made a positive difference.
Yeah.
In terms of some of the technology, obviously you've got teams that are spread out throughout the world. I mean, has there been any particular technology that you've had to embrace this year? And I guess with that spread of team and the pandemic spreading at different rates across the globe, has that added a kind of extra layer of complexity to things?
So the layer, I would say it's added a layer of complexity. I would just say the way we work has changed. So, I pre-pandemic, I used to spend a fair amount of time in meeting rooms and a fair amount of time on the phone or on Skype. But we decommissioned Skype, and now we use Office 365, so Teams, for the vast majority of things. And we also, I think we've had a probably more momentum this year around our own progression about how do we become a data-driven internal audit function. So we've spent some long, hard hours during the pandemic really thinking about how do we translate this into lots of chat and good intentions into genuine actionable plans. I think it's extremely important as organisations become much more dependent on data and technology to get their work done, that there's also assurance on the back end of that. So we've been working in partnership with some of the data analytics areas. We've also been working with a third party to develop a roadmap as to what is our ambition in terms of how data driven we can become. Because clearly, there's a trade-off here. You need to invest first before you get the benefits.
Yeah.
But I do see the role and the nature of audit changing, that as more technology is in the cloud, more controls are automated, that we need to have better ways to get at that. And for some years now, we've been upskilling auditors so that they can test. If you're an operational auditor, you can also know enough about IT general controls. And that journey then continues to become much more integrated audits. Every year we have more and more audits which are about the technology and the processes around it. And I often say to my teams, listen, you might today go in, test the manual controls and come up with a ream of exceptions using sample testing, but tomorrow there'll be less and less of that. So we are trying to prepare for the future now, so that we continue to add value and remain relevant.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I spoke with Liz Sandwood, the IIA, in one of my earlier interviews, and she talked about, I suppose, the COVID era providing an opportunity for the internal audit profession as a whole to embrace much more of a technology-enabled, agile approach moving forward. I guess able to provide that real-time information and assurance that you spoke about, that many of the stakeholders were now looking for. I mean, it sounds as though you agree with that sentiment. And how far do you think the profession as a whole has to go to really, I suppose, maximise that opportunity?
Yeah, so first of all, I absolutely agree with that sentiment. I'm going to take the question and sort of divide it into two, because so agile is one thing. So agile to me is a really fashionable word. And, we indeed have embraced the agile way of working in some of our business lines. But when I go and say that, for instance, at some of my stakeholders, they go, oh, we don't like agile, right? And for me as an audit function, it's about being there at the right time. Sometimes that's well after something's been implemented, but sometimes it's, in the moment being designed. And the teams need to make the judgments as to when the appropriate intervention point is. And also our audit methodology has to be flexible enough that you can get in and out of situations quite quickly. So what I described to you earlier when I was answering about the how we responded to the pandemic, the rapid assessments, the health checks, is something we found useful to get in and out of an area quite quickly without running a full scope audit process and all the overhead, I guess, that generates.
Yeah.
So obviously the stakeholder gets slightly less assurance because we've not looked as deep, but they get it in a better time frame. There's always going to be a place for full scope audits because, you know, I still view that as our core purpose and raison d'etre. So yeah, we need to be fast and you know, there at the right time, but we also need to do work, I suppose, more thoroughly, and that's where I view data analytics as having a role. Because what our experience is actually to do it well, you need to start a lot earlier. So you almost have a pre-planning phase to your audit process, and then you need to get the data, understand the data, figure out what questions you're going to ask, what's the right tool to do that in, and then you step through the audit process, and it's maybe part of your testing, and then you get a better result because you're not looking at a proportion of a big population. You're actually able to look at the full population. So to summarise that neatly. So the audit teams need to be able to deploy a wide range of ways to get the I suppose assurance that stakeholders are looking for.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's about being quick and fast. Sometimes that's about, you know, really stepping up the level of assurance that we're providing using analytics.
I suppose moving on, you mentioned earlier your previous role was head of the internal audit function for Aegon UK. So you were based predominantly in Edinburgh, yeah. And then you moved over to the group role, and you're now based in The Hague. I guess Change, we've got a very successful international recruitment team, so we're very used to supporting candidates as they kind of navigate through an international move. But what were your own experiences of your transfer over to The Hague, and was there any differences in work culture or any other areas that you really had to get used to?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So it was not a decision I took lightly, but it was a decision I suppose I was able to ponder over a number of months as the recruitment process took place. And I was lucky, obviously, just working with my predecessor, who actually took a role in a different part of the business, and so he was still around even as I stepped into the role. So that was helpful to have that support. What for me it was, I guess it's a size and scale thing, isn't it? So you're and I described the UK role that there was a lot of activity. You were very kind of close to what was happening in the business, whereas step up to the group level, you're not as close to that. And the number of people you're dealing with increases exponentially. So I suppose going into the situation, I had some level of apprehension about what it was going to be like, and would it be different? And I suppose I was quite positively surprised to see that it wasn't massively different, and helped obviously having been, you know, I almost went round and I didn't introduce myself to people as you would normally when you're starting a new job. I went round and had sort of almost a conversation that rebased the relationship and asked, hey, what's it going to be like now? You know, yeah. So there were only a handful of people that were entirely new to me. So that made things a lot easier. One thing I did notice though is when you're in a global role, you need to be considerate to the needs and the ways of working in the different geographies. So in our US operation, they like to make decisions very, very fast, and then they implement them and they iterate as they go. In the Netherlands, they don't make decisions as quickly because it's really important that you get consensus and everyone has their say. Yep. And it's also a lot kind of flatter in terms of, you know, I'd have people in the team that were new coming up to me, you know, in days when you could shake hands saying, you know, hi, you know, let's go to lunch. And I was like, oh, this is strange, because coming from the UK environment, you know, that wasn't normal. Yep. So, yep. But it's nice. It's an egalitarian environment. And I guess the other thing I noticed, and this is, you know, you'll probably recognise this, Mark, you know, living and working in the UK, that we like to downplay what we really mean. So we say quite or a bit or maybe to describe situations. Whereas in the Netherlands in particular, people say completely or totally or very. So, you know, it's the emphasis is just different. And actually that very straightforward and frank way of speaking, I quite like, because you know exactly where you are.
Yeah. And I guess, would you say, I appreciate it's slightly different for you in the sense it was natural career progression within the same organisation, but what would you say have been some of the benefits of kind of getting that international move and working internationally?
Yeah, so for me, the benefits have been that it tests your own ability to influence, and there's a lot of, I would say, personal growth in terms of being able to flex your style to different cultures, and then somehow or another you kind of got to bring that all together in a translatable way. So I've enjoyed it. I mean, look, there's both that's maybe some of the professional benefits. I would say personally, there is no way to take yourself out your comfort zone than to have to completely relocate, you know, where you live, learn a new language, navigate all the ins and outs of how you kind of register and you kind of live and where you buy things in a country. You know, all these considerations were a bit of an adventure as well. And I really enjoyed actually getting to know the Netherlands and more broadly, you know, parts of Europe I would have never travelled to had I not been based on the continent. So yeah, there's I think both personal and professional growth in any international move. And what I really like about, you know, my current role, actually, the team around me, we have a very international team within Aegon. So, you know, we've got multiple nationalities. The Netherlands is actually an extremely a good country for expats to relocate to, because the level of English spoken is so high. You know, that there are other benefits to living here. So there's a nice international group, both, you know, within all the business lines, but also within internal audit.
And again, I like to kind of finish the discussions I have for some of these interviews focusing on people's viewpoints around their own personal development. Again, you've touched on some of it with the international move, but you've obviously enjoyed, you know, great success in your own career. Looking back, what advice would you give, I guess, to your younger self?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I have been asked this before, actually by some of my team, who we operate a nice networking program called Build Your Network, and it's a good way for me to, you know, understand who the teams actually are in some of our locations. So for me, if I was talking to my 18-year-old self, I would say, don't be afraid of making a few wrong turns, because you'll land in the right place, you know, after those wrong turns. And actually you learn and grow way more from those than you do from the stuff that goes, you know, all right or very well. So, you know, I started out as a dental student in Dundee University, but I very quickly realised I didn't have the stomach for it. So that was the first of many wrong turns. And the other two were more just about actually culture and environment. So, you know, when your gut tells you something is wrong, then it's telling you that for a reason. So I took a job in the midst of the financial crisis that really wasn't suited to my skill set. And then when I got there, the culture didn't really suit me as a person. So, you know, when you're in these situations, just, you know, recognize it, that sometimes heart is more important than what your head is telling you. And I wouldn't probably be in the position I'm in today, you know, just timing wise, and if those things hadn't happened. So it's all part of life's journey.
Yeah, excellent. Look, what a great place to finish on, Caroline. So really, really do appreciate your time today. So many, many thanks.
Thank you.